materials you really need to make this tote are 2 fabrics. One should be lighter weight and then one should be a little bit more heavy duty. I used this red canvasy fabric and then the stripe one, which used to be an old sheet. So the first step is basically just to get 2 pieces of fabric. There's a fold on the edge if you can't tell. And you're just going to want to kind of eyeball how big you want your tote to be, and then do approximate measurements for that, just so you kind of have an idea of how big this tote is going to end up being. So then you're just going to want to grab the more heavy duty canvas part and kind of do the same thing. I just laid it on top of the measurements I already made to eyeball what I thought looked good. And then for the strap measurements, I literally just grabbed a measuring tape and kind of thought, okay, 37 inches looks okay. I'll just add that to the length of my bag and call it a day. So then to cut out your fabric, make sure you cut out 2 pieces of each part because you need a front and a back. So then you're going to cut out the lining pieces, which go on the inside of the tote. And I'm using the same fabric as what it's going to look like on the outside. So I just laid it out. I laid out 2 pieces again and then used those measurements that I had made earlier to cut it out. So to make the outside part, I laid the lining that I'd already cut out on top of 2 new fresh pieces of fabric that's gonna be the front and back of the tote. And then I just kind of cut out the width of that to use that as a guideline. And then I laid the red canvas fabric on top of that as well, because those 2 are going to be attached to each other, so I use that as another guideline to know how wide the whole front piece has to be. It'll make more sense once you can see it all together. So for the next step, you are going to want to sew right sides together the canvas pieces that you cut out with the front piece. Make sure you don't sew it to the lining pieces because those are going to end up being way too long. And then it'll end up looking like this after you sew it. And that's the front and the back of the outside of the purse. And then for the straps, just cut out approximately double the width of what you want the straps to be, and then the whole length. And then you're just going to sew that as well in half, right sides together, and then turn it inside out so that the seam is invisible on the inside. So this is what we should have now, is the front and the back of the outside of the bag totally sewed together, and then your strap pieces. So for the straps, make sure that when you sew them on, you sew a zigzag at the bottom because the canvas will unravel really easily. And then sew it all the way up each side and make sure you leave a little gap at the top because that's where we're going to be sewing the lining hem. And then do it on the other side as well. So this is what it looks like with the straps sewed on. As you can see, the zigzag stitch at the bottom, and then I did 2 seams going up the side of the straps, which makes it super secure, and then I left that little gap at the top so that when we sew the lining on, we have enough room against the edge. So the next step is to put those 2 pieces right sides together, and then you're just gonna sew along the 2 side edges, and then on the bottom, obviously not the top because it's a bag and we want it to be open on the top. And then just to make it look a little bit more professional, you could sew little triangles on the side just to make it look like it sits flat. I like the way this looks, but you don't really have to do this if you don't want. So for the lining, you're just going to put your 2 pieces right sides together, and you're going to sew along 3 edges of the lining the same way you did before, but this time you're going to leave a little gap on the bottom, like I just showed with my finger. You'll understand why in a moment, but make sure you don't just sew the whole thing closed. And then once you do that, you're going to tuck the right side of the bag on the inside of the wrong side showing of the lining, and make sure you tuck in all of the straps and everything so nothing gets stuck. And then all you're going to do is sew that to the very top edge of the bag, which is why we left that gap earlier with the straps. So this is what it should look like now. Use that hole that you left earlier to pull the bag through, and then if everything went well, both your lining and your bag should be facing right side out, which means everything went as planned. So then it'll look like this, and then go ahead and just tuck in your lining once you sew that little hole up at the bottom. And then the only thing that you have left to do is to sew the straps together with a zigzag stitch or a serge right at the top, depending on what type of materials you have available. And this is the finished product. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy your tote bag.